It was March 2017, the start of a new semester at college. After my first went so wrong due to breakup and depression, I was ready for a new start. My roommate and I both had our beds lofted, with our desks directly underneath, giving us more space in the dorm room as a whole. While it was still somewhat cold outside, my roommate and I preferred to get fresh air in the dorm when we could. And since we both liked it colder when we slept, we'd crack the window open. This particular night, I was feeling a bit more brave and decided to open the window more. That was a regret I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I was disturbed from sleep by light flooding the cracked door as my roommate got up and left to go to the bathroom. I thought nothing of it at the time, as it was almost nightly routine, and closed my eyes again and tried to fall back asleep. I rolled onto my back to try and get comfier, but something was off. The atmosphere felt different. Yes, the cold air outside was clenching, but that wasn't it. I was used to that. It was something else, something sinister. Annoyed and figuring I was just being paranoid, I looked around the room. I rolled my head up and glanced into the closet, checked the reflections of the mirror in the room, and finally I looked down at my feet. That's when I saw a man, or whatever it was. It seemed to have found enjoyment in the fact I discovered its presence as it moved around the side of my bed, its features becoming terrifyingly more apparent as it moved. The few times I have told this story to friends and my therapist, I have avoided using words like inhuman. To me, they were overused, if not cliché, in the creepypastas. But now, after seeing this thing, they are the only words I can use to describe it. Its eyes were a golden crimson, wild and bloodshot. I could not tell if they were glowing or just reflecting the little light there was in the room. Other features became clearer as it came closer to me. Its skin was wrinkled, leathery, and poked with what looked like age marks, though it was rare to tell in the dark. It almost looked grey in color as it moved around to the head of the bed and looked down at me. I saw its scared eyes were sunken into its skull, hair that looked dry. Its breath was hot and rancid to the point where my nose recoiled in disgust, and I held my own. Finally, its mouth. It was genuinely inhuman, more like a zipper running from just under ear to ear that was curved upward in a malicious smile. I turned my gaze away, convincing myself it was only a night terror. That was until I saw him pull out a wicked-looking knife, jagged and black as obsidian, almost shaped like a Tibetan spirit knife. From that point on, I just closed my eyes and began to pray to whatever that was. Go away. I felt the blade of the knife touch my throat. I was shivering, whimpering like a puppy in fear, and that seemed to fit this thing all until a warm light filled the room. Instantly spun around in my bed and looked up at my roommate, who had this concerned look on his face. It wasn't until the next morning I found out it was because of the fear in my eye and the tears running down my face. I asked him if he could shut and lock the window while he was up, to which he obliged before crawling back into his bunk and falling back to sleep. I envied him, for I had no such luck. I had only seen it one other time, while visiting home. I was watching videos on my phone as I tried to fall asleep, and again the atmosphere seemed off. I shut my phone off and just listened. Finally, I sat upright, and there, in the closet, was the creature. I've never screamed so loud in my life. I blinked, and it was gone. But I'm not afraid to admit, I slept on the floor in my parents' room that night. I have no idea what it was, but both cases happened to have the window open or cracked with no screen or any sort. I do believe it has some sort of ill intent with me. Part of me was hoping Reddit could not only help me get this story off my chest, but also get some answers as to what this thing might have been. I just hope I can find answers before it ever decides to come back. Hey everyone, I found this place looking for somewhere I could drop this off to without being called crazy. And honestly, after thinking about a few things, I do feel right between crazy and paranoid. I moved to a new place a few months ago. It's a relatively small house, but as the confirmed bachelor I am, it's a palace. Aside all space I need for day-to-day, living it even has some extra room. I didn't fully decide what to do with that yet. One of those is a small windowless room right next to the stairway, leading to the upper floor and basement. When checking out the house, I already had ideas about turning it into a hobby room or dedicated gaming cave. Though, as things usually go, it turned into I'll pack these boxes later room for the time being. As time went on, I did venture in there now and then to dig through the boxes and search for something, but didn't feel like putting in place just yet. Everything was normal until during a late-night TV binge. I had a sleep-drunk craving for a milkshake and decided to dig out that blender I use. So, as per usual, I went to the room to look through the boxes marked kitchen. I opened the door, only to find another door. As you can imagine, I was kinda perplexed, holding the handle of my actual door still in my hand. I definitely opened it. Looking over this strange second door, I found that this side had no handle, just a smooth metal plate in its place with a keyhole. Giving it a push, I found it locked, so I couldn't get in. I stood there for a while, puzzled about how this was possible. I imagine that maybe this was some kind of strange construction where both doors usually stick together as one and just now separated in some way. But that was quickly dismissed. The second door sat on the other side of the frame and opened into the room where the first one opened outwards in the hallway. As such, there was also a gap between them, not too much thicker than my hand. Further trying to rationalize, I thought that maybe this door had been there all the time and was just always open, so I missed it. But no, that wasn't it either. It sat center of that room wall, not against an edge, so I must have seen it at some point. I must have kinda zoned out at some point. I guess that can happen when your brain is confronted with something impossible. I found myself sitting on the sofa watching TV, as I did before. Pretty much instantly, I thought that was no dream. So I got up and opened the door, and it was normal. Just the one door opening to a room full of boxes. I was relieved that it turned out just to be an odd brain fart. Things were as normal for the next few weeks again. I didn't have to go in there often, and every time I did, it was just the one door. Until one day, I wanted to put something away in there. I opened the door, only to find the second door again. I almost dropped what I was holding. This time, it was in the middle of the day, and I was wide awake. I even pinched myself just to make sure it wasn't a dream. The second door was there again. I was definitely faced with some kind of odd phenomenon and decided to do some investigating. First, of course, I again tried to open the door. No luck as before. No handle. Door locked. I did have the idea to try the actual key to the room, to the one from my side at least, but it didn't fit the lock on the door. I even tried out my Hollywood door cracking skills with a piece of wire as a lockpick and the old credit card thing, with no success, aside a broken wire hanger and a bent-to-held piece of plastic. I then thought, how reliable is this door appearing, since I opened and closed it several times without it being there. I closed the outer door and opened it again. The inner door was gone. Closed and opened it, still gone. I repeated this, I think about 9 more times, before it was there again. Another closed and opened, and it was gone. I tried this for the better part of an hour, coming to the conclusion that this is random, though it never seemed to happen twice in a row. I also wondered if I could film it happening through the only camera I had. I did wanted to see what happened inside the room though, since my stuff was still there. I figured my phone wouldn't vanish. After making the inner door disappear again, I got in the room, started recording on my phone, and propped it up a bit so it filmed the doorway. Then I went out and went through the door 6 times until once again the inner door was there. I waited about 10 seconds and also decided to knock on it a few times to see if the camera picked that up too. After closing and opening again, sure thing, the room and my phone were there. I watched back the capture footage, seeing myself prop it up, leaving and closing and opening the door 6 times. Then, after that, the door in the footage remained closed. After roughly the estimated 10 seconds, the door opened again, showing me once again to pick up the phone. The knocking wasn't heard either. So yeah, I was still kinda stumped. I figured that maybe this is some kind of alternate dimension. When the door closes it, sometimes open to a different universe. I don't know. That seemed to make the most Star Trek logic kind of sense. The only other thing I could think of is getting a peek into the room while the other door is there. The keyhole was no use, but there was a thin gap between the door and the floor, not big enough to look through directly, but I figured something could fit under there. I decided to order a cheap endoscope camera that plugs into your phone. While waiting for it to arrive, I decided to leave the door open, and that time, the second one never appeared. Closing and opening the outer one was indeed the trigger. Once the camera arrived, I made the inner door appear again, then fell down and wiggled the camera into the crack underneath it. It was a tight fit, but after some pushing the tip popped in. On my phone screen, I could see a room that could pass for the real, but with a few differences. For one, the boxes weren't there, but some junk on the floor looked kind of filthy actually. There also was a window on the opposite wall, one that definitely isn't there in the real one. I then wiggled the camera around to get another view. When I moved in right, I saw another doorway, one that also was impossible in the location of my house, as it would intersect with the stairs. This just kept getting weirder. While trying to zoom in on the window, trying to make out anything outside, I suddenly noticed movement. The door on the right was opening. Now, I was between terrified and thrilled. Who or what would come in? Suddenly, the other door opened inwards in a way that obscured whoever opened it for the most part, and the bitty quality of the camera didn't help much. I could see them throw something into the room. And then I did something stupid. I knocked and called out, "Hello?" The person in the door seemed to pause and step more into the room. I put person in quotes deliberately because that's only vaguely what it resembled. I can't quite describe it due to the poor quality I had on the camera, but that was enough to convince me this wasn't human. It approached the door. I could actually feel heavy steps approaching it now. Then I heard something I couldn't instantly place, but made me tense up, only for a bit to hit me a second later, yanking my phone back and making the camera still stuck under the door pop out of the USB slot before slamming my side door shut. It was the jingling of a heavy keyring. Opening it again nervously after I calmed myself enough, I was relieved to find the normal room there again. The camera and cable were gone, probably still stuck in the other room. I then wanted to punch myself in the face for stupidity. I never hit record on my phone. I just watched the camera feed, and I definitely did not want to repeat that experiment. I first wanted to lock the door and throw away the key, but then thought that maybe the other door really didn't appear and disappear. Maybe it was some kind of thing where it's always there and not there until you check. If so, maybe that thing on the other side could easily break down my door. I decided to instead take the door off its hinges and store it in my garage. Whenever I left the door open, and I never made the other one appear, so I figured this was the safest option. Well, I could say that that's it. I still live there, but nothing bad ever happened since then. No weird noises, no nightmares, no odd other rooms anywhere in the house. But there still was something that now bothered me even more. You remember I set up my phone in the room once to see what happened when the other door was there? When writing down the event, I rewatched the footage, and I did notice something I didn't back then. The first few seconds showed me propping up the camera and leaving, then the door opening and closing until it stayed closed, then opening and me keeping up the camera again. I wasn't paying attention to one detail though. When I picked up the camera in the end, I wore a different shirt than when I placed it down. Then me in the footage that placed and picked up the phone were different people. Then I thought back, how often did I close the door behind me when I went into the room, not knowing of its properties? Where am I?